Ready to roll.
Therapy dudes, take away your stress, put you in a good mood. If you had them over, they would eat up all your food. It's time for therapy dudes.
Andre, what is happening? This is
Not
Therapy
much.
Dudes. I'm Dan Fox with Andre Karkamaz. We are sponsored by Boulder Psychological Services. Check them out for all your therapy needs at boulderpsychologicalservices.com. So, Andre, I know
Yeah.
we're talking about what's happening in the school year, and there's a couple things I want to say about that just before we get into the details. One is that we're recording this over spring break.
Okay.
It will probably air. I think we have about 3 weeks of episodes that are already in the queue. So it'll probably be airing in about like April 10th to 15th, somewhere in that range. So with that in mind, right, I'm going to be talking about like what happens in the sort of like second half of the semester and what parents should be focused on. And real quick, I've been a school counselor at the high school level. I've been a high school math teacher. I've been a high school principal. So I'm bringing that background plus the therapeutic lens that we have to how to support our kids during this like last part of the school year.
Okay. How should we support him?
I'm glad you asked. So I think one of the things about this time of year that is significant is illuminated by comparing it to what tends to happen more in the fall. Because at the end of first semester, as we're getting into like December, there ends up being this kind of, I would say, it's a very hard time for students. Sports have typically ended, and it's getting colder and darker, and there's a lot of anxiety and mood stuff that is coming up. December is often my busiest month out of the entire year because old clients that I haven't seen in a while are hitting a crescendo of stress, and they're kind of coming out of the woodwork because they're trying to figure out how to just, get to winter break. And in some cases, winter break isn't feeling particularly relaxing for people because they have to spend more unstructured time with extended family. And often that can just bring a different kind of stress. And winter break is also very different than summer break because it's only a couple of weeks in the cold. Summer break feels like there's a huge light at the end of the tunnel. And that's one of the features of spring, where unlike the sort of increasing anxiety and depression, a lot of students are feeling like an excitement about finally being done with the year, with the school year, and getting a lot of time off, almost 3 months time off, and being like really happy that that's on the radar. And one of the challenges there is that a lot of times finals are still stressful, and they're often getting, for students that are kind of resistant and procrastinate, sometimes the sense of like, oh, well, by the time it gets to the summer, it doesn't matter is a little tricky for people. And they often need a little support with, executive functioning planning. Does that term make sense to you, Andre, or should I unpack that a little bit? Executive
I mean, it
function.
makes sense to me. Teens needing executive functioning planning, um, like helping them understand the ins and outs of day-to-day life and kind of planning for that.
Yeah, and just like, prioritizing where they focus their energy and breaking down bigger projects into step-by-step pieces. A lot of times it's just at this stage in the game, especially for procrastinators, it's kind of like wait until the night before and then just try to like smash your way through it, and helping them to have some balance and to try to encourage the work before play approach, right?
Yeah.
If you do your work before you play, then the play is this reward and it motivates us to get through the work. If you procrastinate and so you're doing all your play before the work, work is kind of like a punishment, and
Yeah.
there's no motivation to get through it because it's not like you have the play waiting for you as a reward anymore. You've already like
See, I feel like adults struggle with this too.
absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a really hard um, thing to be sort of like delaying gratification, right? Having like a sense of the long term and trying to figure out like what's going to make me happy when I wake up tomorrow morning. What will I have wanted to accomplish instead of like what's going to make me happy right now in the next, 15 minutes, half hour, or
Yeah.
hour, whatever it is. And on that note, I've been experimenting with the lockbox for my phone and encouraging clients to be trying, ways to boundary their phone. And I am happy to report that I have my first client who is now working with the brick. Do you know about the brick?
The brick, it's where you put your phone in it and it locks for a certain period of time. Is that the one?
Yes, yes. It's like an app on your phone that also relates to this actual like physical hardware device that is, I don't know, kind of the size of a large earbud container. Um, and you can either, temporarily lock apps for like a certain period of time, or you can just indefinitely lock them until go back to the brick device itself and tap your phone on it, and then it'll unlock them. So, like, if you have a child who is going on a sleepover and you want to lock down certain parts of the phone until they get back home, you can do that.
Okay.
And you can just,
You have
self
a client
discipline.
doing this?
Yes, yes. They're
Oh,
they're like in their final year of college and have some, significant projects to be finishing up. And they've like, locked down their phone from all the like non like all the entertainment apps, all the ways that they would distract themselves. So,
okay.
still things like communication or I don't know, financial apps or just, the stuff that we wanted, like weather and the map or whatever, like stuff that they aren't going to waste a ton of time just, scrolling,
Doing.
scrolling or watching
Yeah.
videos or whatever. Right. So it's been a nice way to like force a boundary because
Isn't that crazy that this is what it's come to?
well, but I think it's because the apps sort of exploit this problem in our mind, which is that when we compare like willpower to primal chemical drives, the primal chemical drives win out. And
Yeah,
specifically in this
it's true.
case, the lizard brain is, kind of operating from the pleasure principle and just wanting to have like good fun now. Right. If you ask the lizard brain like what to do, it's just trying to survive long enough to reproduce. And it's happy to like sleep, eat ice cream, scroll on the phone, get its dopamine hits, all that. If you ask our like smart thinking wizard brain, what do you want to do? It'll respond with the word should. Well, I should, and then it'll like list all the chores and the obligations and things like that. And the wizard brain's tool is willpower, which is good, but very flimsy in comparison to the drives that the lizard brain controls, because it can
Well,
put
right.
chemicals into our bloodstream and into
And
our
how are people supposed to have willpower when they're depressed and anxious all the time?
right, right. Or when their lizard brain is like, you must go eat ice cream right now, or like scroll on your phone, like we have to do this, right? And the wizard brain can't really beat that because the lizard brain's great at being like, hey, you have to do this, and I'm gonna make you feel really tired when you think about any other chore or school
Right?
project or whatever you have to do.
That's the part that sucks the worst.
Right. It's
It
it's a
makes you
gimmick
feel tired.
because the second you flash on something that the lizard brain wants to be doing, you'll have the energy to do it because
I know it's so
it's controlling
jackass
the
backwards.
chemicals that make us feel more energized or more fatigued. But the long term like fix for that is to recognize if we just persist through the lizard brain's initial response, right? If it's like you're too tired and you start to do it anyway, it will then, right? It doesn't have like a long-term memory for, oh, I'm trying to make this person tired, right? It'll just get focused on the next thing that we're doing. So we can often push through. But the benefit of the brick is that in a moment of willpower, you can like front load several hours of discipline by just, setting it up on this device so that there is no access. And
But can you undo it?
if you go back to the brick, you can like undo it. But if you're like out of the house and the brick is at home,
I
then
see.
right, you have to like get back to it to unlock all the stuff. So
Okay.
it's or you put it on a timer, right? You can put it on a timer and it'll just lock it down for a period of time. Um, but the benefit of that is that if you know, like, all right, I need to have like 5 hours of just focused time. If you just try to do that, you have to keep coming up against your brain going, I don't want to do this. My phone's in my pocket. Scroll, scroll, scroll. And you have to just continue to be like, no, 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 no. But with the brick, if you just put the boundary in place once, it clears out that like battle for however many hours you've got it locked down. And,
Okay.
it's kind of like if you have ice cream in your fridge, this really applies to me. I'm just talking about myself here. If you have ice cream in your fridge and you like want ice cream and your lizard brain's like, I want it, even though I'm like, no, I shouldn't have it. Right. I have to keep being like, no, no, every time I think about it. And usually by like 8 or 9 at night, my willpower is diminished and I'm eating ice cream. But if I just have the willpower not to bring it into my house, right, to like win the battle at the grocery store,
Yeah.
then there's no ice cream in the house, right? So even if my willpower is weak, I've set up a structure so that it's not going to be able to like get its little, unhealthy treat that's going to make me regret having done it later on. So all these kinds of things are things that we as adults, even though we struggle with them, typically we're much more used to that struggle and have developed more strategies to manage it and to delay gratification than our kids. So when we're trying to help them as students, it's really useful to have an ongoing process of connecting with them around school and checking in around like what's coming, what are their goals, making sure that they, aren't going to be surprised by some end of the semester projects or by like, a couple of midterms happening at the same time or, two difficult finals on the same day or whatever it is. Like we're pretty good at looking at calendars and details of when things are coming due and being able to like strategize because we've done that with our adult brain for decades. And usually our kids are just kind of like getting their systems in place. So if you haven't already gotten into a habit of, say, once a week, checking in with your kiddo and trying to figure out, hey, let's look at this stuff and do it together, right? So you're like with them practicing executive functioning skills and planning out how they can attack the challenges that they have going on, right? That can be a really good foundation to like get into the last several weeks of the semester. If you haven't done that yet, this is a great time to be like, let's end the semester strong for like the final 5 weeks. Let's just, check in every like Saturday and make sure that you've got a game plan for the week and that you're covering all your bases and that, if there's anything I can do to support you, we can get that set up too. And
Yeah.
that kind of support, right? So not just telling them, but also like showing them how to, plan and navigate this stuff, I think is very useful for a lot of kids in high school and college, because even though their executive functioning skills are coming along, usually we've got a pretty good baseline of systems because we've been doing it for so many years.
That makes sense. God, it's exhausting being a parent.
It's
I've got a 4-year old. I'm just planning ahead.
yes, no, that those are some fun years when it's, there's different kinds of challenges and it's exhausting in a different way, but the school stuff hasn't created a lot of stress yet.
Right. Yeah.
And the adolescent pushback of like, leave me alone, I hate you, like you're the whole
Yeah.
reason why my life sucks, right? Like
Oh,
that,
that happens to you too. I hear it with all my clients.
right? Right. It's tricky. I feel like luckily, um, two of my kids are past that. The 15-year-old doesn't really have that, and the 13-year-old definitely will go there, but then just, you know, later on come back and be like, I'm sorry, I was unhinged. I love you, and do the repair work.
Oh,
So
okay, good. You've
we've got,
modeled something right.
well, a lot of it I think is just, our kids' personality and temperament. All four of my kids are really different that way. And it's been, a journey with each of them. And even the 20-year-old and 19-year-old, it's still like, there's stuff that's challenging. And, the second part of what I want to talk about today, which we'll do in the next podcast, is about summer planning and how to like have a summer that's going to be effective and functional for our kids. And for my family, that's the bigger issue right now than nailing down the end of the semester. I've got a lot of confidence that we'll get through the semester, but much less that we'll have a summer that's going to really be satisfying and meaningful and purposeful.
Okay. All right. See, I feel like putting a lot of stress onto the summer is like, it already stresses me out to think about it. Putting a lot of like, we're going to be doing all these meaningful things. What does meaningful mean for summer with the kids?
Right, right. Well, should we like, we've got a couple more minutes to wrap this one up, and then we'll answer that one in the next pot. That'll be how we start.
Okay.
The pressure of like having this meaningful summer, I think, is stressful.
Like, oh God.
Um,
It's hard enough to get them to have a meaningful day.
right, right. So I don't know if there's more to say on this topic of like helping them finish school strong, right? To summarize, having conversations and having a rhythm of multiple conversations to just sort of follow up and support them, I think is useful. And getting that check-in structure in place, if it isn't already, it's a good time to do that now, to just set the goal together that we're going to try to like finish the semester strong, and to recognize that if we have a kiddo who we know is a bit of a procrastinator, this is an easy time to just be like, it's the end of the summer, like, or it's the end of the school year, the summer's coming, let's not worry about this.
Mhm.
But I feel like really being intentional with them on setting goals of like, what do you want to achieve by the end of the school year? When you get to like the summer, if this has gone successfully for you, and if you're happy with your results, what would that look like? And that can be pretty specific, going like class by class and looking at, what grades they want or what projects they want to be really like crushing. And that's worth doing. And it's also worth thinking about like what kind of boundaries they need to have around some of those lizard brain impulses
And
of
the psychosocial developmental model that they're in, or the stage they're in. That's also important to like keep track. Like I just feel like you have to hold a balance between both for them to be able to get there.
yeah. And this is a very peer focused time of life, right? In terms of like identity development, the the challenges of what we're doing, which is we're thinking like, well, is this, as a parent, is this behavior that they're doing around their academics going to translate well if they were doing this on a job 10 years from now? And that's not really fair, right? Like you're saying, that's not the developmental stage they're at. They're much more focused on trying to figure out how they fit into their peer group, if they can like, develop intimate relationships,
Yep.
what kind of awareness they can take from trying to interpret people's communications with them, and trying to navigate like, how am I fitting in? What do these people think of me? All these are kind of newer questions that people are asking towards the end of middle school and into high school and college, and
Yeah.
they need a lot of time with their peers to practice this stuff. And
Yeah.
at the same time, they need to have some, boundaried interaction with their peers because it can't be all encompassing. And a lot of times, kids can get themselves into predicaments with risky behaviors that are either just, making dumb choices or making choices that are dumb that also include like substances and getting into a potentially addictive problem. So
It's
that
true.
too, right? I think the idea that we want to be connecting with them and checking in with them about academics also extends to their social experience. And it's really hard to do this if we're not able to kind of fuel their tank, right? If
Yeah.
the kids were, a car, we can either, fuel or steer, right? We can either like lift them up and kind of fill their tank or be more like focused on controlling.
That's
And
true.
as they get older, we definitely want to be fueling more and steering less
Yeah.
because the steering will be stressful for them and it'll be conflictual for the relationship. And that tends to limit our ability to actually be helpful on these different domains of supporting them socially or academically, right? They're less likely to listen to us. They want to just kind
They're
of,
going to see us as oppositional at that point because we're going against what they're intrinsically motivated for at that point.
yes,
So
yes.
you're saying less boundaries as they get
Um,
older, or less? How would you describe it?
um, I would think less imposed boundaries as if we're like lording over them, right? If we can work with them to kind of mutually come up with ways that they think they want to be boundaried or they can self boundary if they're asking for these boundaries, that's going to go a lot farther, right? Because then that's more of us like kind of fueling their tank. But the more that they feel controlled, the worse it is.
Right. The more they're going to push.
Yeah. And if we're trying to like just a simple way to understand like fueling their tank is if we were to somehow be measuring their nervous system while we're interacting with them, are we soothing them? Do they feel better and more relieved from the interaction? Or do they feel stressed and kind of called out and are trying to like get away from it and getting relief when the conversation's done and they're away from us, right? Like that's controlling, right? They're feeling controlled and
Yeah.
stressed, which is necessary in some situations, but we want to be really aware of whether what we're doing is more like fueling and soothing and supportive or steering and kind of controlling and
You kind of want to help influence them in the right direction as they get older. You don't want to control them in the right direction. You want them to come into the understanding on their own. It's the difference between telling someone if you do drugs, like it's a bad thing and you're going to get in trouble, versus like this is actually what happens if you become a drug addict. And like, I wouldn't want that for you. Would you want that? And helping them
yes,
choose not to do certain substances or choose not to engage in certain risky behaviors.
right. So I think this is going to lead very nicely into what I want to talk about on the second half of this in terms
Okay.
of the summer structure. Um,
Okay.
so let's wrap here. Thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll talk to you in a minute.
Therapy dudes, take away your stress.